Okay. So one of the things we want to, one of the ways we can help ourselves loosen our grip on our tendency to be so self-preoccupied is, trying to always think of others, to put everything in context. So we know we don't want to suffer and we want happiness. Just want to remember that that's for there. Nope, that's not it. That shouldn't even be open. Anybody see my little? There it is. Da-da-da. So let me see what do you call this? A display of hands of people who like to recite the refuge prayer at the beginning. Okay, so we're going to do that. And those of you who don't see themselves as Buddhist or whatever, you don't feel like you have to do it too. But for those who identify as Buddhist or have taken refuge, it's good for us to practice. So we will start with that and then read the 4 measurables. Only it's probably good if we do this. I'm all over the place this morning, aren't I? Okay, let's do this version. So everybody can see that? Okay. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. And may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. So now just kind of set your own personal motivation for this class. Why you showed up. The intention to use your time well. And it's nice to include the wish that it will benefit not only yourself, but all those around you. So last week, we've been talking about different states of mind that help us be open to everyday joy. And so, and just joy in general, So one of them came up, is forgiveness. So did anybody think about that this week? Was that on anybody's mind? Did we all ignore it fiercely?
I think for me, it's always on my mind, you know, especially in these challenging times. You know, I have to constantly practice that forgiveness and people that I deal with. I mean, fortunately, I'm able to, in most cases, select who I deal with, you know, so I don't have a problem there, but maybe with other situations, yeah, it's constant practicing forgiveness, constant. And I kind of have a problem, if I might just say, maybe you could explain it a little bit better. In the book, they talk about, you know, not forgetting, but forgiving. Well, sometimes when you don't forget, you end up holding a grudge. So I'm kind of confused with that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. The reason why they're two separate things is that, okay, I look at it with myself, okay? It's one of those things, but like sort of the difference between guilt and regret to me, okay? So guilt is that mind that, you know, kind of holds on to mistakes or whatever, you know, things we've done, or, you know, aspects of ourselves that we just think are terrible or whatever, and holds on to it, almost practically packs a suitcase or a backpack, it carries it on, carries it around all the time, thinking that, you know, because you think that's who I am, you know, it's not just a moment in time or this or that, it's like you've taken it on like, oh, this defines me, you know. Whereas regret is more of this like acknowledgement. Ooh, I'm sorry I did that. That wasn't, you know, for whatever it is, big mistake, little mistake. Ooh, didn't do that skillfully, you know. But then wants to do something, you know, wants to really try hard to not do it again, because we recognize the hurt it does to ourselves or others. You don't just find you know, you don't sit there going, I am this. It's more of, I did this, and now I want to make amends for it if that's appropriate. But mostly you want to really try to work on your mind so that it wouldn't occur to you to do that again, you know. But I find that, you know, with regret, when you remember your negative past actions, it just helps you to not, you know, it reinforces, oh yeah, that's right, I really don't want to do that again. Forgetting it can lead the pathway to forgetting everything about it, that it causes harm, that we didn't feel good about it, da 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 da. Doesn't mean you have to carry it around, but it's just, in other words, you know, when those periodically, when some big mistake you made, or, you know, comes to mind, or you remember something you said to someone and you just sort of kind of go, I can't believe I said that, you know, instead of, you know, responding with the kind of thing of that sick feeling of guilt, you know, we just kind of go, oh yeah, that's right, I don't want to go there again, you know. We accept our limitations, our, you know, the fact that we can't change the past, you know. But, and the same is true like with others, you know. It's not like, you know, there's a lot of stuff that sure we can just forget all about, and we have, you know. But sometimes we forget, not because we've forgiven, but because we've pushed it back in our minds and won't allow ourselves to think about it because we haven't forgiven at all, you know, whether it's ourselves or someone else. And that just festers. And it can explode if you've suppressed it, as opposed to really digested it and let it go. And then there are things that, you know, I mean, like, you know, like just with myself, you know, my past errors, you know, it helps me from time to time for them to pop up in my head to remember, you know, because I haven't eliminated the kinds of states of mind that can lead to those actions of speech, and body. So it's a reminder. Well, just like in history, we don't want to forget the wrongs that our nation has done or other nations have done in the sense of erasing our history, because we don't want to repeat it. So that's the difference, is that we, it's not like the state of mind that accepts what's happened, meaning that you acknowledge it. I'm sorry, my internet's unstable, so if I'm going in and out, I can't help it. I don't know what to do about it because I'm plugged in. Let's blame the company.
It might be helpful if some of us turn off our video, because that takes a lot of bandwidth.
But my understanding is it's only from my side.
Does seem to be only you, but.
I mean, you turning your video off doesn't help mine. That's my understanding, but let's try it. We can all become little boxes. I can't turn my video off, I don't think. Maybe I could. We'll see if it improves, Bye, everybody. So, where was I? Forgetting and forgiveness. Okay. A lot of what forgiveness is that ability to separate actions from people. Nicole, you're going to have to be my guide if.
Sure.
Okay, as far as letting me know have things improved at all?
Yeah, so far, I mean, I really noticed 2 small areas, and I mean, that was in like 20 minutes. So I'll keep you posted.
Okay. Okay, so maybe I just need to turn off my video and I can see all of you again. Probably not. Anyway, this idea of try to bring to mind a moment when, when you've forgiven someone else. Now, if to remember that forgiveness, generally you also remember the circumstances. But it doesn't have to, remembering the circumstances does not have to be a condition for the hurt feelings to arise again, the anger to arise again, the disbelief to, whatever it was, whatever the experience, however you experienced the circumstances. We can look at it with a bit of distance when we've forgiven. And we probably don't even spend much time on it unless we're actually choosing to reflect on it. And so we really have to understand if we're kidding ourselves about having forgiven someone, if when we remember, it stirs up all those initial, the way you experienced it the first time around, or the 75th time around. And so how can we gauge whether whether we've really forgiven? or whether we're still sort of holding it, and that can become a condition for us to retaliate at some time. Does anybody get what I'm saying? I can't see. This is so strange. Okay.
I do.
All right. Thanks.
Yes, I get it, and I find it helpful for you to discuss it because it's a question that I have asked myself repeatedly. Have I actually forgiven?
So the steps of forgiveness involve acknowledging what happened, not necessarily with anybody else. I mean, but in our own minds, we have to acknowledge, you know, what are the circumstances that we feel need forgiving. You know? So it's not about hiding from experiences. Graziella, did you have a question?
I have a comment.
Okay.
I was thinking that maybe forgiveness comes in layers, maybe. And
That's big stuff.
and maybe I think that I have forgiven, but I didn't at all.
Yes, that happens.
Yeah, and you had mentioned before that in Buddhism, if I got some of this, that there is really no reason for forgiveness because people are something to do with people with their own karma. Is that right?
No, that's often a way people misunderstand Buddhism and forgiveness. You know, yes, it is true that in karma we would say, you know, because of cause and effect, that everything we experienced, we create the cause for. So I would say that compassion is sort of the Buddhist equivalent of forgiveness. Compassion, equanimity, loving kindness, you know, it's this attitude where, you know, it's understanding that we've created the cause for ourselves to suffer in the future, and other events are conditions for those seeds to ripen, you know. So in any given circumstance where someone, say, is hurting us in some way through language or actions, that we, you know, our experience is the ripening of some past action of ours. The person who's harming us, that we perceive to be harming us, is creating the cause to suffer that way in the future. So we can have compassion for them as well. So it really, when we can't see, you know, and to me, this is that part of forgiveness. Oh, it's accepting that we're suffering sentient beings. We don't know what we're doing. That we are looking at the situation from our own narrow perspective, you know. We might not have taken into account, you know, the perspective of the other person, blah, 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 you know, so that really understanding that not forgiving is an experience within ourselves. You know, forgiving is an experience within ourselves. It's not something that necessarily, you know, it has nothing, in Buddhism, it has nothing to do with earning something. So someone has to earn my forgiveness. No, they may have to earn your trust, But forgiveness is, it's a different kettle of fish in Buddhism. So it's this idea that we don't have this idea in Buddhism of deserve or not deserve or guilt, in the sense of, you should identify with all the mistakes you've ever made, kind of thing. Right or wrong, it's really just, if you don't want suffering, then you want to avoid the causes. And the causes are doing things like harming others, harming your body. These are things that create the cause of harm. This is what the Buddha observed, and when he became omniscient, he could see all of these causes and conditions in everybody's life, So it's this understanding of cause and effect that you could say it's like selfish self-interest, it's like, if you want to be wisely self-interested, then you need to understand cause and effect. So understanding that not forgiving someone results in a very tight, suffering mind every time, you think of the event or the person, or the people involved, and understanding that we're creating our own suffering by that mind, because the event is past. So another aspect of this is, you think about, we've read some things about Tibetans who were in prison when China came to occupy Tibet. And so many people went to prison, and for many years. And so that's an ongoing condition, right? So then we can think about how does one forgive in a condition that's ongoing while it's happening. And again, it really is about compassion, loving kindness, this understanding that the reason these things are happening, the conditions of, say, being imprisoned for political reasons, for no actual actions, just like everything else, it's because all sorts of causes and conditions came together and ended up like this. And our karma's involved, so our past actions have something to do with ending up in this condition. The same with the others involved have all, contributed from their past actions and past habits to this condition. And really understanding that we're all in the same boat. So if we're being oppressed, we've been an oppressor in the past. And the way out of this, trading places, so to speak, is to respond to the conditions in a new way, a way that understands cause and effect, a way that has compassion for other sentient beings, a way that has compassion for the self, for the suffering. This is the whole point of dealing with true suffering, is really understanding, oh man, we suffer. We create suffering within ourselves. We hurt each other, so we're conditions for suffering, all of this kind of thing, so that we can let go of this idea that this person out here is hurting me, and instead see a suffering sentient being out of control, not knowing what they're doing, and that they're setting up, you know, their future suffering. They're building the foundation for it. And we can really feel compassion for them. Yes, Francesca.
Hi, Tendron. I'm thinking about when you finally forgive, you know, somebody, you're kind of taking the power out of the hate. Like, in other words, and you were talking about in the Buddhist perspective, like maybe in some ways purifying the karma so that it's not going to continue on in their life or your own life. And also, it's, to me, sometimes in a way, once you forgive somebody and they know you've forgiven them, they won't maybe hold the hate or the anger anymore. It's kind of like reversing the like a reverse psychology in some ways.
Well, the trouble is it has to be sincere. So
Yes.
all of this has to be sincere, but we have to understand that the hate we may have or the hate we're receiving is an internal thing. So if we're feeling hatred towards someone for something they did to us, we're giving the hate power. It's our mind. It's totally ours. The circumstances are the condition, but we can decide, oh, maybe this response isn't helping me at all. Maybe I should abandon this strategy and replace it with another strategy. You know? Mm-hmm. And this takes, especially depending on what it is, you know, this can take some work. But one of the ways we can work with it is kind of examine smaller conditions, not the great big ones, you know, and kind of look at cause and effect. What does that mean? You know, creating the cause for our own suffering. Well, if it's mental, we're talking about, you know, obviously if it's physical suffering, then if you can, you remove yourself from someone who's physically harming you. If you've got an illness, you go see a doctor. You know, I mean, we do what we can do, you know, and then we reach a certain point with our bodies where we can't do it. And we just, oh, this is what it is today. So, or at this moment. So
it's like not feeding, like, I guess what I'm trying to get at is not feeding the situation. Once you know this person's trying to anger, this person, not that they're
yeah,
trying to anger, not that they're trying to anger you. You've become angry over an action that they've done, and it's not them intentionally.
And that's entirely you. Okay.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So then the power, like by not getting angry, it doesn't give them the power to anger you.
They never had it to begin with.
They never had it to begin with.
You know, we just think that way. We think external circumstances determine how we feel, how we think, how we view it. You know, this is what self-grasping does. And it's not just grasp, because we don't just grasp it ourselves. We grasp at the self of everybody else, of all phenomena. So we think that person, that evil person, is trying to make me mad.
Right.
You know?
Right. But they could have intentions.
This is where we've got it wrong.
Yeah, but they could have intentions to deliberately. Matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
It absolutely has nothing to do with you. That's their mind. And this is the thing that the Buddha's trying to get us to get.
Right.
You know? This sense that, oh, I have to be controlled by my conditions and by the other people, is the Buddha said, no, you don't. It's made up in your mind anyway. You're making that up. And it comes from this misunderstanding of existence. Not understanding dependent arising. And we do it when we don't forgive ourselves, when we blame ourselves.
Mhm.
You know, we are, you know, we're not looking at all the, you know, that we, and we can't even, I mean,
She's still blanking out.
Venerable,
countless numbers.
Venerable Tendron, you just broke up.
I see it while I was just talking. So, Robert, go ahead. If you can hear me, Robert. There you are. Yeah.
I can hear you. Okay. A couple things you just said is this is very interesting. So it seems to me to forgive yourself would be 1,000 times harder. For the reason being is that if someone wrongs you, I mean, you tend to think of the action and you either choose to forgive them or you don't choose to forgive that person. But with ourselves, if we do something wrong, we look at the mindset of what caused us to do that, and that will take you down a whole nother path because now you have to change your mindset. You know, it seems very difficult to articulate, but it touches what you just said with ongoing, like say you're the Tibetans were in prison. So it's like having the offensive God or whatever right there 24 hours a day. But in our mind, the offensive God, it's in ourselves. And so,
Yeah.
And that is so much harder, I would think, to forgive, because I guess what I'm trying to say, we tend to forgive the actions of other person. With ourselves, we know the mentality of why we did that.
I don't think that's correct. I think
Okay.
that it is, it may seem that way, but I think the reality is the reason why it seems that way is that we can walk away from others. You know, so yeah, we might forgive them, but we'll never trust them again. You know, we say we forgive them, but it changes the relationship, and maybe it should. But it's just, you know what I mean? We can walk away from others' actions. We're stuck with ourselves and our own history, right? You know, and we can't control how others respond to us. They may walk away from us, you know? So there's a lot more at stake, seemingly. But I really think that until we really learn what self-forgiveness is, we probably haven't learned how to truly forgive others either. It's just that there are many things that happen that other people do that just we don't care enough about to really. I mean, it's just, you know, it's just not that big of a deal. But if our friend does it, or our partner does it, or our kid does it, you know, it becomes a bigger deal, you know, or our boss, you know, it's interesting, you know, but it's just this kind of thing. And so then we can come up against something where we convince ourselves that someone else has done, and we convince ourselves, well, this is a line that is, you know, too far, you know, I can't cross this. I will never forgive this person for this. So basically that's saying we don't get cause and effect at all. We don't get the nature of samsara. We don't understand suffering sentient beings. And a critical part of this process of forgiveness is forgiving someone does not mean you don't release them from your life. I mean, we can walk away from people whose actions, you know, are not functional or dysfunctional or harm us. I mean, you know, because they have their habits and we can't control their habits. We certainly can choose to walk away if that's a choice. Obviously in prison you can't, but in prison you can choose to see what we consider the objects of our anger, like the guards or the person who put you in prison or the government that put you in prison, or however you want to look at it, whatever you're zeroing in on. You know, we can understand that our anger that can grow into hatred, is just looking at a narrow sliver of all the actions of that person. So we can either focus on this one action that has to do with, me, or we can see them as a whole suffering, sentient being. We don't have to give them any power over us. Is this making sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Is it not making sense too?
Well, I just have a question here that is making sense and very helpful. But when you mentioned forgiveness is the ability to separate actions from people, what always helped me, so I guess I was on the wrong track, what always helped me is to say to myself, if somebody behaves so badly, well, they are who they are. And that's what I'm dealing with. And I have to accept it or, leave that person. So I'm kind of confused there.
Okay.
And maybe you could explain that little portion to me.
Okay. Is it? Everybody understand Marianne's question? You can, put your thumbs up under reactions, I think.
Not really, but maybe in your answer you'll explain it.
Okay. Well, you may not relate to it. So, okay. So let's look at this. We all have our habits, right? Somebody put their face up so I can see you go, okay. Thank you. We'll see how this goes.
Yeah, I don't think it's making much difference us turning off.
Okay, but okay. And if maybe if it gets bad, I'll turn my screen off and that will help. Okay, so this, we have our habits, right? And what the Buddha said is that we are not, you can't ever find you in your habits. The you or me, the I, is just the label on this, this body and mind in every moment, So we all have habits. So it isn't that we can't know that we can kind of go, okay, the odds are good. Like I know about myself that I have such a strong habit of impatience that whenever I have to wait, the odds are good that impatience will arise. Okay? And the same is true. It's okay if your cat wants to join us. The same is true of everybody around us. Everybody has their habits, right? And some people's habits we find more difficult to tolerate than others. And that's why they're not our friends. And that's okay. That's just preference. The problem is when we start to think that those habits that, don't make us fond of them are who they are. And no one could possibly like them. Then we're starting to put, superimpose our little narrow perspective with our preferences, our habits, all this stuff onto a person, saying they are that. So it's fine to realize, to kind of assess, like if you have clients or people that you have to work with that, their style and your style don't go together, but they have habits, unskillful habits, to be able to understand that you can choose to be upset by those habits or choose to not be upset by those habits. To not have the expectation that those habits shouldn't arise. Us tolerate the discomfort we feel experiencing someone else's habits. Does that make sense? I tell you, language is really inadequate sometimes. The words and semantics but it's because it's a very precise thing to understand the difference between recognizing that we have preferences, but our preferences do not define people. But if we're accustomed, if our own habit of mind is that every time we make a mistake, we think, oh, I'm a terrible person, we're going to do the same to others.
Tendron, isn't this part of the teaching that any name that we put on a phenomenon is really not the phenomenon?
Oh, of course, it's just a label.
And so it's that deeper habit of mind that we associate the label with its inherentness, that it's inherently that which we name it.
Well,
and
we name it and then we grab it. And then we're superimposing, because there's nothing wrong with the name. Name's no big deal. It's this, like you said, where we superimpose onto the name an inherent nature. And when it's a habit of mind or a habit of speech or a habit of body of someone else, we can, or ourselves for that matter, we superimpose inherence to that. I'm inherently an impatient person. Which, so we get the jargon. That would mean I will always be an impatient person. I have no control over it. And that's not true. Yes, Graziella.
I was thinking that what you just said could also be a justification for not forgiving. So this person is like this forever and bad. And so it makes it look permanent and worse, and a reason that justifies hating or demeaning always. So thank you for that, because the opposite, it means that it's transitory, like mine would be, and then worthy of letting go and having forgiveness.
And understanding that that part is our choice, and it is all along. It's our habit to respond in different ways. Some people, I don't know about you, but I've had friends in my life who don't seem to ever hold a grudge. They clearly practice forgiveness in many lives, if you want to call it forgiveness or compassion. Because to me, forgiveness holds all these things. It holds acceptance of where someone is in this moment. It holds this idea that things are temporary, impermanent, that, we're not defined by this little slice of their life, or ourselves for that matter. So it's an acceptance and this compassion that, we don't know what we're doing So, you know, and we really think that we have to control things out here in order to be happy and be free of suffering. And so in that particular circumstance, it may be they're trying to control you. And they're wrong. You know, they're mistaken about what's going to make them happy. You know, and we may not be able to affect the way they think at all, you know, but we can start to understand that maybe the strategy we have now, which is to react, you know, by the person holding them, you know, helpful to ourselves. You know. So it's this internet unstable is helping me pause. I get this little message. Okay. And I really think it's important in the West because we have a habit of guilt and holding ourselves eternally accountable for mistakes we've made. We define ourselves by the mistakes we make. We also define ourselves by the success we have, only just a very tiny part of the time. Except for those people that we consider arrogant, and we think they do it all the time, you know. So, you know, it's this developing, you know, part of our healthy sense of self, because the self exists. The self is what's experiencing suffering, you know, experiencing pleasure. But this self that is these things, and the self that is not these things, you know, that just doesn't exist. This other person, when we grasp at the, you know, when we think this other person is this way or that way, you know, and we can see it at both ends of the spectrum. Infatuation is when they can do no wrong, you know. And then sometimes in divorce, it's they can't do anything right. You know, it's this, you know, we decide someone's a monster at one end and decide that they are all that, you know, there's just their perfected happiness, you know. So neither, and anything that we hold even in between those things is not accurate. It's this holding.
I had a question, and maybe I'm restating the obvious, but you were talking about forgiving ourselves and how we hold on to our, like as a society, we hold on to our successes and define ourselves by, you know, whether it's a failure or a lack of, you know, quote unquote perfection. Why do you think it's so hard for us to forgive ourselves? Is it kind of tying back to what someone was saying earlier about, you know, that sense of I and me and grasping, you know, and self, you know,
Well, everything can be. I'm having trouble. Is anybody else having trouble hearing Satia?
Oh, I was just sorry, I was just stopping, but you know, just wondering if that's why it's so hard for us to forgive ourselves. Like if that ties back to that, you know, that mistaken sense of self and yeah. So just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, yes, self-grasping, holding ourselves to exist in some sort, and each other to exist in a way that actually is impossible to exist. An independent, self-sufficient, you know, permanent way that's independent of causes and conditions. I think also, you know, we've created, those of us who grew up in the West have pretty much created the cause to be in a culture that things in terms of, defines things in terms of good and bad. People are good and bad, you know. People, in order to be happy, you have to deserve it. People have to earn things. I was reading a description of the Puritan view, you know, that sort of founded this country's, a lot of this country's culture, you know, and it's, you know, it's like the antithesis of a Buddhist view, you know. So but this habit that thinks that I have to be a certain way in order to be accepted in the world. I have to be a certain way, which usually means I have to be perfect and not make mistakes. I have to be the smartest. I have to be, you know, at least, you know, able to function in every sport, in every art, in every, you know, I mean, it's, you know, we have these ridiculous standards in our mind. And that those standards, whatever they are, you know, they change, of course, over time, but we still are holding ourselves to this idea that we have to be that in order to, you know, get what we want, be happy, whatever, to avoid suffering, you know. And this clinging to this idea of ourselves as having to be this way or that way. So every time we catch ourselves not being that way, our attachment and our aversion arise, where we start to cling to our own misunderstanding of our existence. We cling to this, you know, we start and we feel like, oh, I'm never going to succeed. I'm a terrible person. I'm a lazy person. I'm, you know, all whatever is appropriate to those particular conditions in our mind. That's grasping out of a sense of self that's impossible to exist. And so this is why it's so important when we have those thoughts to immediately challenge it and say, oh, really? Is everything you've ever done or try to do a failure? Do you make a mistake in every moment of your life? Are you mean in every moment of your life? Are you selfish in every moment of your life? Are you, you know, I mean, you have to really counter this grasping at some permanent you that's a failure. Because it undermines any idea of existence that is changeable. And it gives external conditions all the power over you. You know, so that if somebody else doesn't like something you did, or doesn't like your work, or doesn't, you know, whatever it is, then we're, you know, we grab after it as proof that we're bad, evil, stupid, inconsiderate. And we don't just look at something with that reasoning mind that says, oh, yeah, I can see that that might be felt inconsiderate. And they go, oh, maybe I don't want to, you know, repeat that behavior. But it doesn't, and we can do that because we can change. Some habits are harder to change than others. Some, if someone just reminds us, we can get clued in and change it. That, when seeing a difference.
That was very helpful. Thank you so much.
So, and we have, so this forgiving others as well. When we remember events, I mean, often we do this with family, our parents, with, you know, depending on our age, you know, we will remember, our partners certainly will remember something And there's a tightness immediately, that arises, and that's a clue we haven't forgiven, And so we might want to look at, what is it we're holding on to? Are we just afraid it will happen again? Are we thinking that treatment defines us? How, and really understand that we have this powerful, powerful mind to work with, that we have the ability to step back from conditions and examine them. Look at our behavior, look at others' behaviors, start to understand that, to know what we, to really have this experience of, wow, we're all in the same boat and none of us know what we're doing. And have compassion for ourselves, have compassion for each other, and let go of holding on to anger, holding on to seeing ourselves as having been a victim of someone else, I mean, in other words, it's like, we can be a victim in the sense of someone does hurt us, but we don't have to make that last for the rest of your life. How we choose to respond to being hurt, that's within our power. We may not be able to we definitely can't prevent being hurt. We created the cause for it, for one thing. But also just, we're vulnerable, right? We can get killed in a car wreck. We can get hurt in a car wreck. We can get hurt walking across our room. So it's this is just the reality. But we don't have to see ourselves or anyone else as, naturally evil or naturally stupid or naturally this or that. We're all good at some things and not so good at others. We're all kind in some circumstances and perhaps not in others. So it's really being able to not look at ourselves or others with attachment and aversion, because those states of mind are exaggerating either the positive or negative. Y'all want to have a chat with each other? So why don't you just form groups? Don't stick me in a group if you can, if you're able to do that.
You just don't join. How about that? Does that work?
Yes, but just make sure I'm in a group of more than 2 people so that there's someone there. Well, if I don't join.
I'll switch space. I'll go join your room.
Okay. So just maybe discuss this. What would y'all like to discuss? Is there, yep. Well, you can discuss what you're going to have for lunch, but that might not be useful. So think about, everybody just think about some aspect of this that either is clearer to you or less clear to you. And maybe your clarity will help someone else in your group, or maybe your confusion can be helped by someone else in the group. Does that sound good? Okay. Hey. How'd we do? Has anybody solved the mystery of life for us?
Yes.
Good job.
Listening. Yeah, listening. Somebody, yeah, I think we were just talking, and just going back and forth reminded me of something from Carnegie about paying attention and listening to somebody, even if they're angry with you, or people get when they realize that you're listening and paying attention and want to try, and you're trying to understand, it's very helpful.
Yeah. And it's usually noticed. People feel heard if you're really listening. I mean, you know, if your body language is good.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Maybe it was listen with enthusiasm or something like that, Jack. Yeah. And the one that always sticks out in my mind is from Dale Carnegie, is that a person's name is the sweetest and most precious sound to that person. So I always remember that
Well,
when I try to
that's the
pronounce
truth.
things correctly.
Oh, that's funny. All right. Anybody have a question that their group came up with or want to share, or?
Not a question, but maybe building on what you spoke about at the beginning about separating the action from the person. And I always go back to the analogy of you getting an fender bender, like a car hitting you. You don't get upset at the car, maybe you get upset at the person. Not that that's right either, but we can look at people in the same capacity that, that we perceive them harming us as if they're, but we have to remember they're out of control too, like they're under the influence of ignorance.
Right.
I find that helpful, that analogy.
Yeah. Me too. That's really an important one, is, and part of the reason we cannot have that, we might not have that habit, is because we don't accept it ourselves, about ourselves, that, so we hold ourselves to, that we're in control.
Or we want to be, right?
Yeah,
should
we
be.
like to think we are. Yeah. So. But is anybody familiar? Like, one thing you might want to think about this week is think about a time when you made a conscious decision and you tried to follow through, that you really, you were very mindful about whatever it was, and you kept having to remember it. When you forget, you go, oh, that's right, and you were really being effortful about whatever it is, and how did it feel to be able to do that? Obviously, it's, sometimes, we're not succeeding, and then but then after a while we might develop, like when you try to develop a new habit, whether it's to exercise or to meditate or to eat less junk food, I don't know, it's just this, but where you've put some effort into, you had to really remember, any addict knows, if you want to quit smoking or something, you really have to think about, oh yes, no, I'm not going to do that. You can think about it all you want, but it's not an option to actually have a cigarette, whatever. So, but think about more about just what the experience of acknowledge, of this, oh, I do have some power here. I can change my habit. I'm not stuck forever in this habit energy. And then, see how that experience of thinking about it, how that fits with your sense of self, that we grasp after a self that is a certain way, and just, be able to, just kind of see how, that we clearly prove that things don't exist the way we hold them to with our own experience. We do this. So we just need to, we recognize other people. We realize, oh, I've been holding them to be this enemy when it turns out they were on my side all along. We're still grasping at something there, but we want to see how we actually intellectually get how impermanent everything is, how we're not really in control of what's happening outside of us, but our response, and sometimes our response to events, that seem, that it sometimes make us really frustrated or angry or impatient. Other times don't at all, so we really want to understand how powerful our mind is, and that we actually can use our mind to change our habits, even habits of mind. And that we've already done so in many areas of of our lives, in this life alone. So, is that making any sense? Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Perfect sense.
All right, so that, we really want to build, and when we have make these mistakes of beating ourselves up with our words, where we really think, oh, I am a total failure, So, sure, there are things that we have attempted to do again and again in this life, and we've never succeeded, So, some things we have to kind of go, okay, maybe not this way. They're really hard for us, But there are other things that we have, been able to overcome, with relative ease. It's just, it's it's not this linear process. It's more of a, and learning how to open your heart to accepting that about yourself, of being able to open your heart to your, oh yes, I'm a limited being, but I have moments of incredible kindness. I have moments of wisdom. I have moments of greed. I have all these moments, but that I can, and I have successfully directed myself towards some really skillful habits. We want to rejoice in our capacity for change, our capacity for loving kindness, our capacity for compassion, our generous nature, all these things. We have all of these things too. And develop some confidence. Okay, because confidence isn't pride. It's just looking at, what you've done and going, oh, yeah, I can do that. And I promise, I'm not going to perform brain surgery in this life because, I can't do that. And that's okay. So, all right, so let's remember what, any last burning questions or thoughts or comments before or announcements? How about announcements?
Yes, I will make the announcement about the new link for next week. New month, new link for the month of October. So next Sunday, just try to remember a little earlier. Thank you for that. And maybe Rebecca, you want to say something about Thursday?
Yeah, so I just want to let everyone know that as Venerable Tendron is on her retreat sabbatical, is kind of what I've started calling it. We have some other guest teachers lined up, and the first in our entourage will be Nick Rebush, who is an amazing FPMT founder, and he had just finished medical school and became a doctor, and then ran into these two lamas that changed his life forever. If you have any books from the FPMT, you can be certain that Nick Rebush had a hand in making that happen. And he is a wealth of knowledge, and we're very excited. He's going to be doing the Spiritual Teacher Discovering Buddhism module, which begins on Thursday. And you are most welcome to attend, and I promise you won't be sorry. And then following after that, we do have Venerable Amy coming. We have Don Handrick, and we have Venerable Rabina for the whole month of January running into February. So just, stay tuned and go to the website to be able to register for those. So thank you. That's it for me. Thank you, Venerable Tendron, for a wonderful, extremely helpful teaching today.
Okay. And I'm not on retreat yet, so I will be teaching every Sunday until Thanksgiving, and I will be teaching Tuesday nights, every Tuesday night until Thanksgiving. So, I don't start retreat till like January. December, I will be doing the family visit routine. If depending on COVID, Joe might still refuse to see me. So we'll see. But so I haven't gone away. And of course, but I do encourage you to check out Nick Rebush. He is the Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive guru. So, we won't have these folks forever, that have, that actually, knew Lama Yeshe, interacted with Lama Yeshe, like Jackie and Nick Rebush and all sorts of things. And I can think of 3 senior FPMT students who were doctors and gave it up. It's like Venerable Gyatso, Adrian Feldman, who's written a couple of books, and Venerable Elsa, who also edits a lot of wisdom publication books, as well as Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive. So it's really interesting to me, so, anyway, doesn't matter. Okay, so let's now, rejoice in what we've done this morning and our efforts trying to, look at things from a different perspective and work with our minds and not assume that we know what we're doing, and, and really try to, explore other possibilities. And we're going to dedicate all the positive, seeds we've placed in our mind stream to ripen to benefit others until there's just no suffering sentient beings at all, which I really hope will happen soon. So here are the prayers. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of our merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments, whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. So thank you very much for your participation and your efforts and your